Welcome to our Spotlights on Creation series. Come and learn with us the marvels of God's designs. God gave us two methods of learning about Him. He gave us an inspired written record called the Bible. And He gave us a natural world that reveals important truths about God. The object of our programs is to learn from God's second book of nature. So that means we will be looking at natural science without evolution. In this episode of our Creation Spotlight series, we will not focus on a particular group of animals or plants as we typically do. Instead, we will look at the concept of ecology. This is a crucial area that every naturalist focuses on at various times. It binds everything together and explains the natural world in ways that nothing else does as well. So it's a very useful area of study. Examples of ecology are easy to find. In my lifetime, I have watched a perfect example play out in Yellowstone National Park. I have visited this great area many times since 1980, back when coyotes were common and elk abundant. There were no wolves anywhere, as they had all been killed decades before I was born. But ecological science predicted that wolves needed to be in this habitat, doing a job that only they could do. It took a lot of effort, but in 1995, timber wolves were finally reintroduced. The last 25 years in Yellowstone have shown the many changes to the park that this one change has instigated. I am actually in Wyoming right now, among my absolute favorite deciduous trees on earth, the Quaking Aspen. Thanks to wolves flourishing in Yellowstone, aspens are now growing in areas formerly overgrazed by elk for decades. I once watched wolves feeding on a bison carcass in Yellowstone's Lamar Valley. A huge grizzly bear showed up and tried to scavenge it himself. But he was thwarted in his plan by an annoyed herd of male bison who decided to drive the massive threat away. Watching 20 bison charge a grizzly was a remarkable experience, as rarely do I see these alpha predators run away from anyone. All the while, the wolves snatched as many bites as possible before the bison finally got bored and wandered off, allowing the bear to return to claim the kill and drive off the wolves. And watching this three-way interaction was a clear illustration of the ecology of nature playing out in front of us. This is God's real-life ecology, set up and guided by Him throughout history. Not dry theories from textbooks, but living, vital interactions of animals and plants right in front of your eyes. When I watch butterflies, bees, and beetles pollinating flowers, I am seeing the building blocks of nature. If they don't do their job, everything falls apart. When I first started watching insects, I sometimes spent a few hours in a meadow, identifying all the life available. In the last decade, that experience has become increasingly difficult to repeat. It is discouraging to wander through beautiful fields of flowers and not find any insects on them. The collapse of insect pollinators is not something I have to take on faith from any environmentalist. I see it firsthand from a lifetime of field work. Ecology is the tool that warns us that pesticides, habitat loss, and the meat industry are all working to destroy the foundations of our life support system. So now let's take a look at ecology and see what we can learn about the interrelations that God established in our world. This Spotlight on Creation is part of a series of around 20, many of which are only available on DVD. Visit our website to order them all. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our new videos. So enjoy a sample of natural science without evolution. When we look at the world in which we live, what do we see? The animals, the plants, the people, the land, the sea, the sky. Do all of these exist independently? If not, then how do they relate to each other? Ecology is the science dealing with the interactions of living organisms and the natural processes of the planet. This science is huge and infinitely varied, and has real practical importance to our daily lives. What can ecology teach us about God and the creation we live in? God placed Eden in a perfect world. No death, disease, danger, or competition existed. When sin began, almost every aspect of life had to change. Most ecology we see today is God's backup plan. Without drastic intervention, life on Earth would likely have ceased to exist. So we should remember that the ecology we study today is not God's original plan, but rather His temporary way of dealing with the curse of sin. Let's look at some examples of ecology. Why do animals and plants live where they do? Individual species live in very specific conditions. Some are widespread. Some are isolated. Finding out the reasons why tells us a lot about the way life works. Why are the natural habitats the way they are? Why do deserts have cactus, while prairies have grass? Why do warm, sandy coastlines have palms and mangroves, while cold, rocky coastlines are dominated by seaweeds? Who eats what and why? How does the food chain work? For example, wolves reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park have changed the entire ecosystem for the better. Surprisingly, wolves have benefited species such as the quaking aspen, golden-eye ducks, and grizzly bears. Why do systems work this way? Plant communities never stay totally unchanged. New communities are constantly replacing the current species. Some ecosystems require being burned regularly to be healthy. Why? Animals and plants interact in amazingly complex ways. Many cooperate with totally different forms of life. We now know that 80% of plant species have symbiotic relationships with fungi. Without the fungi, plants struggle to absorb nutrients from the soil that only fungi can digest. This is why many crops fail and forests recover poorly from clear-cutting, since the crucial fungi are not taken into account by farmers and lumbermen. So these basic examples show us what ecology is all about. But how does this matter to us? And what does ecology show us about creation? When we study ecology, we find that human survival depends on many other species. God has made plants and animals to serve special roles in His creation. Plants provide us with both food and oxygen. God has made insects to pollinate plants as they gather nectar from flowers. Pollination is one of the most important processes in nature. Without pollinators, we would have virtually no food, as most plants require this interactive process. Forests are some of the richest habitats on Earth, providing us with food, medicine, clothing, and shelter. Forests hold some of the greatest diversities of life. God created a wide variety of plants for us to eat. How we grow our crops has a huge impact on our health and daily lives. The perfect system of Eden is long gone, but God replaced it with a workable system of checks and balances to maintain life even in a sinful world. But even a casual examination of our world today finds a system breaking down. Nothing seems to be working well anymore as we reach the end of time. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Part of this is Satan's constant efforts to weaken and destroy the works of God. But much of the problem is our own disregard of God's principles of ecology. Pesticides have destroyed entire species of native pollinators, and even honeybee colonies are collapsing. Areas in China that have lost insect pollinators now require humans to hand pollinate each individual flower. Do we really want to take on the arduous task of pollinating our food ourselves? Insects pollinate plants for free and are happy to do it. What about God's forest ecosystems? As humans use more and more water, the trees needing more water die out, replaced by plants suited to drier conditions. When grazing animals are allowed to graze at will, they tend to change the local plant life. This combination has resulted in many forested areas first changing to grasslands and eventually becoming arid deserts. Humans either must move away or try to survive in much more hostile conditions. The rich warehouse of life in the forests is lost, and human life changes from prosperity to survival. For restoring the ecosystem to the original conditions is usually difficult or impossible. So when we look at the world we live in, we find that we need to be mindful of God's creation. God gave us dominion over the plants and animals, and He expects us to fulfill our responsibilities. When we do, God blesses us and keeps the system running well. Ecology gives us a glimpse of God's design in all its many forms. Let's look at how ecology magnifies the greatness of God and the hopelessness of evolution. When we look at a single cell, we find it stunningly complex. Take away any part of it, and the rest will cease to function. When we look at the complexity of a single species, we find it to be too complex and well-designed to be the result of random chance. When we look at the infinitely more complex interrelations of all life, we find the impossibilities infinitely multiplied. So when we examine life at any level of detail, it turns out to be irreducibly complex. How can evolution account for the web of interactions that had to develop to make life possible? Which part of the web of life came first? Most life cannot survive without the support structure of the rest of nature. But if originally there was virtually no life on Earth, how could anything have survived long enough to develop into the rich tapestry we see now? Only if nature is set in place at the beginning, with all the parts fully interlinked, can life continue to thrive and prosper. The study of ecology is the study of God's incredible planning and power. Ecology affects every single one of us. Unless we understand the patterns God has organized, we will forever be damaging what we don't understand, and we will all suffer. The unmatched miracles of creation are a never-ending source of wonder and beauty that testify to the Creator, who has given us this world to live in until He returns again.